Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Crowdcast, which is Princeton Public Library's virtual home for hosting authors. My name is Janie Herman, and I am the manager of adult programming at the Princeton Public Library and your host for this evening. And I'm so delighted to have an evening of historical fiction with two wonderful, popular authors at our library who have written many, many books, and I'll introduce them in just a moment. We're just waiting for everybody to log on. The numbers are still climbing. As we do, just so you know, we will be taking questions at the end, and there is an Ask a Question box down there for you to ask your questions, and you can upvote the answers as we go along to see what questions are most popular. This event is co-sponsored tonight by Labyrinth Books, and Labyrinth Books, you can see there's Purchase the Woman with the Blue Star or Eternal from Labyrinth Books. This actually takes you to the link for The Woman with the Blue Star, but you can search their catalog for Eternal. They carry both. And if you would like to get a discount from them, you get a 10% discount. I put at the top of the chat that information in. The Woman with the Blue Star is put the promo code Jenoff at checkout, or for Eternal Scottoline to get 10% discount. And at the top of the chat, there's also all the instructions, and I will put them in again at the end. And finally, I'm going to put in the link here. We are teaming up with Harper & Collins for an event on July 27th with several other libraries. And if you like thrillers, you're going to want to come to this one. It's with Karen Slaughter. It's a Library Love event with the Library Love Fest team and Karen Slaughter. And several libraries are helping to co-sponsor and promote that event. So I put that link in there for the Karen Slaughter event. You might want to pop over there and save your spot while this event is happening. Okay, I think we have enough people logged on that we can officially begin with the introductions. Oh, one other thing is, if you're having any problems with hearing or the event or any kind of audio or video issues, there is Get Live Audio Help right down in the left-hand corner. If you do that, it will help you out, or you can put something in the chat and I'll help you out. Okay, so tonight we are here to do an evening of historical feature. Oh my goodness me, it's been a long day, I'm sorry. An evening of historical fiction featuring two best-selling authors discussing their latest novels, one set in Poland and the other in pre-war Italy. And in this case, we're featuring Pam Jenoff and The Woman with the Blue Star. And she's being interviewed by Lisa Scottoline, who has written her first historical fiction novel, Eternal. And so Pam is the author of several books of historical fiction, is a New York Times bestseller, most widely known for The Lost Girls of Paris and The Orphan's Tale, although she has a wide catalog of books. And she lives in the Philadelphia area with her husband and 3 children, where she teaches law. And her novels are inspired by her experiences working at the Pentagon and as a diplomat for the state. Lisa Scottoline is also a New York Times bestselling author of 32 novels, with over 30 million copies of her books in print in over 35 countries. That's pretty impressive. She also writes a weekly column with her daughter for the Philadelphia Inquirer. And she has developed a course called Justice in Fiction, and she teaches that at the University of Pennsylvania Law School, which is her alma mater. So we have 2 people very interested in the law and now historical fiction. And Lisa is also from the Philadelphia area. And just before we logged on here, we were talking about her Philadelphia books and how much she brings that area to life for us. So I think that's enough introduction, and I am now going to bring our authors online for us. And so welcome Lisa, who is going to be doing the interviewing tonight, and welcome Pam, who is going to be talking about, although I hope we're going to hear a little bit about both books in the conversation. So I'm going to make myself disappear to the background right now and let you two guys take it away.
Ooh, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Pam. It's so wonderful to see you.
Great to see you. Thank you for doing this. I was saying that the last time I saw you was right after Eternal had launched.
Right.
So it's been a few months.
But I know you are a huge fan of libraries and a Jersey girl. So, and an expert historical fiction author. One of my favorite historical fiction authors. I want to show everybody. This is only part of my Pam Jenoff collection. But I am just so thrilled to be interviewing you tonight about what I think is your best book yet, The Woman with the Blue Star. I hate that it comes this way, but this is this amazing, amazing novel. I loved it. I think it's sort of trademark Jenoff in that it's about the Holocaust, but not as a historical subject, but really brought brought to life. You make us understand the impact on real people, real families, in this case, 2 families, and really 2 young women who meet in this incredible way. It's such an incredible premise, and it's based on facts. So maybe I'll let you describe the premise, and we'll just jump right in.
All right. But before we do, I have to say thank you for being here, Lisa. This is amazing. And I was, even before we were friends, and we have so much in common, right? Because I think
we're both of us.
In law, we both practiced at large firms in Philly and knew lots of the same people, all of our many connections. But I was a fan long before I was an author, because I went up to Lisa at Barnes & Noble on Rittenhouse Square when I was an aspiring author and asked her for advice, and she was very generous. So this goes back decades.
Well, I love giving advice, and you're too nice, and I remember that. And here you are, girl. So tell us about The Woman with the Blue Star, because I love this premise. It's so visual and cinematic. It should be a movie. Go ahead.
From your mouth to God's ears. And they said, if Hollywood said yes, I wouldn't say no. The Woman with the Blue Star is my 11th novel. And some folks may know me, some folks not, but most of my books have centered around World War II and the Holocaust. And so this particular book was inspired by a true story I discovered when researching. Now, let me say, first of all, I don't write true stories. I write fiction inspired by true stories. But I also, you know, when I go looking for a story, and I don't know about you, Lisa, but I'm looking for like the story when I go looking. And how I know is the gasp. It's the aha. So if I can find a story that after 20 years of working with the war and the Holocaust makes me gasp because I've never heard it, I'm hopeful that readers will feel the same way.
Agreed.
And so, right, for The Woman with the Blue Star, I discovered a story of Jewish people who survived World War II by hiding in a sewer in Poland. And I don't mean they hid in that sewer like they ran through on their way out of town. They hid and lived in that sewer for more than a year. And reading this, I had so many questions. Who were they? And how had they survived? And who had helped them? What were their lives like? And in particular, I was taken by an anecdote of a young girl in the sewer who one day looked up through the sewer grate and she saw a girl her own age buying flowers on the street. And she was struck by the disparity between her own life and that girl's. Her mother in the sewer said to her, "Someday there will be flowers for you." It was this kind of promise. And hearing this, I imagined what would have happened if the girl in the sewer and the girl on the street had the chance to meet one another. And what would that have meant for both of their lives?
Right. I mean, I just think the visual of that, and you could just see that happening. And I really love, now I understand that part of this true story was based in another Polish town, but you moved it to Krakow. And what I think is so fascinating about that, because I think settings matter so much in novels, and you bring such a verisimilitude of what you know about Krakow because you lived in Krakow. Tell us about that, because I think that's really cool.
I did. I lived in Krakow for more than 2 years, close to 2.5, when I was a diplomat for the U.S. State Department.
Well, so what does that actually mean? What did you do? Because it sounds so cool.
So I went to Poland in my early 20s in 1996. And now everyone knows how old I am. I turned 50 a few weeks ago. But anyway, I went to Poland. And when you go as a junior diplomat, you don't go to work on, exciting things like the war. You go to stamp visas and passports and help Americans if they get in trouble overseas. But when I went to Poland, it was right after communism had ended. And so for half a century, that country had no free speech. They were cut off from the West, and they had never had an honest conversation about World War II and what had happened. And they had many issues that were just frozen in time, and they had to resolve those issues as a new democracy because they wanted to join NATO and the European Union. And so it became this very powerful topic in the 90s. So I walk into Poland, early 20s, no family, totally alone. And if you think back to then, no cell phones, no email or internet. So I'm alone halfway across the world, and I'm Jewish. And so what I did was I gravitated toward the surviving Jewish community in Krakow. And you know, I live in Cherry Hill, and I used to go to synagogue like twice a year in Krakow. I went every Shabbat to an Orthodox synagogue, which was an education. I went to the rabbis every Saturday for lunch, and the elderly survivors took me in as though they were my grandparents, and they shared their stories with me. And the U.S. consulate in Krakow saw that I had this natural rapport and relationship, and we were only 8 Americans in Krakow, so it wasn't very formal. And they said, you go work on all that stuff from the war. And so for those 2 years, the war was my job. Wild things like Elie Wiesel is upset because Polish Boy Scouts with good intentions put up stars and crosses on the field at Birkenau where his family had perished. I would try and work it out. Or Hillary Clinton, then First Lady, wants to tour the camps, and I would spend a week there with the Secret Service. You know, very grassroots work.
Wow. Wow.
Rewarding it, but yet challenging. And I came back so moved by those years. And that's really where the stories come from for me.
Oh, that's so amazing. And I think you really get it. I've never been to Poland, but you really get a feeling of maybe, yeah. First I have to leave the house. So that's that.
I know. The struggle is real.
And I think you really get a sense of Krakow and how, you know, and these girls meet. Now, I love also that what starts to happen, and I think it happens very realistically, is there's a friendship that unfolds very gradually. Do you want to talk about that? Talk a little about Sadie and Ella, because I love these characters. I think the characterization of these families is so well etched that they're unforgettable.
Thank you. And I remember last time, I'm going to do this, but I remember last time you spoke, we were talking about our novels, and you were talking about the fact that mine like are kind of just starting out their friendship, right? They didn't have this history, and I had to kind of build the friendship. And I think about that sometimes as I'm writing when you said that to me. So Sadie is a Jewish girl, and she first is taken from her normal home to the ghetto in Krakow with her parents. And then when the ghetto is liquidated, meaning they're going to clear everyone out and send them to the camps, she escapes with her parents through a hole in the ground where the toilet was into the sewer. This is a plan that her father had devised, and this is taken from the real story, that they drop into the sewer where they live with a few other families who have escaped and the help of a local sewer worker. And this is their situation. And, you know, it's funny in hindsight, like they didn't know how long they were going to be staying there. She thought, oh, we'll just be here a little while. You know, it's like us last year, right? 2 weeks to flatten the curve. We were all going to be home. Right. Right. She didn't know, you know, that she was going to be in the sewer for quite so long. So she's down there and things get worse and she's more and more isolated. And she looks up and she sees this girl on the street. And the girl on the street is Ella. Ella is Polish. She's not Jewish. She's not being persecuted. She comes from an affluent family. And so at first blush, it seems like she has it really good. But when you look closer, you'll see that she has no family left except for a really awful stepmother who is consorting with the Nazis and a fiance who went off to fight in the war and never told her he was back. So Ella is living her own personal kind of isolation and confinement. And so there's this real deep need. And when she looks down in the sewer grate and sees Sadie, there's this instant connection.
Right. And, you know, that's one of the things I loved about the novel, because you are an expert at writing historical fiction, but I was kind of a rook. And so what I love about it, though, is that, you know, these families are a little messy, right? Ella's mom she has a stepmother who, as you say, is kind of a collaborator and kind of a bigot. And here's Sadie in the sewer with her mom, who's pregnant. She has a brother who isn't there. I mean, I thought this is so interesting because it feels like, I want to say it feels like a modern family, but the truth is modern families have, it's not a question of when they existed. Families have always had divorces and pregnancies. And do you understand what I'm saying? I mean,
yeah, and stuff.
It's stuff, right? The stuff of a real family, and it made the novel feel real and also classic. How did you do that? I thought that was great.
you just have to put yourselves in the shoes of these people, right? So, I mean, one question I get asked a lot is like, why is there romance in these war books? And I say, it's not that you're setting out to write romance. These are young women at a point in their lives where romance would have happened regardless of circumstance. So it's certainly not the primary thing on their mind, but, you know, Sadie is in the sewer and there's this young man down there, Saul, and it's complex because he is from a very religious family and he has a tragic past holding him back. And so the interplay between Sadie's family and Saul's family, who in real life probably would not have interacted. You know, there's these kind of ways that the war brings people together where they otherwise wouldn't.
Right. And the same is true on Ella's side. She has someone she loves. Do you want to talk about that? Because I thought that romance, I just think so much is right about this book. And that's one of the things too. You know, when we talk about love in novels, there's a friendship that develops between the women. And then there's the romantic love. And I thought that you did that so well in her. I mispronounce it. Is it Chris?
I used to call him Chris. I think it would be fine. Okay.
Talk about Chris. Talk about Chris and Ella, because I thought that was really nicely done, really deft.
Thank you. So Chris was Ella's boyfriend / fiance before the war, and he went off to fight for Poland. And, you know, the war for the Poles was really short lived and he doesn't come back. So she's wondering, has he been killed? Is he missing? Like, what's going on? And lo and behold, one day on a Krakow street, she discovers that he is back. And it's this great shock to her. And, you know, he went away and became involved in resistance work. And so he's been distancing to protect her. Now, once he's back and that's all out, he sort of would like to bring her into the fold and have her help with the work. And of course, she is stopped from doing that by the fact that she is protecting Sadie in the sewer. She started helping this young girl and she really can't tell him, at least not right away. So they are very star-crossed with the best of intentions because of the things they can't say.
Right. And I always have a secret thought that drama comes out of choice. It doesn't come out of, it's Job. If it's a bad thing happens and a bad thing happens, what really makes something dramatic is there's a choice to be had, because I think partly the reader thinks, or at least I do when I read, what would I do? And when she keeps, you know, I was with her when she makes that choice. Does she tell? Does she not? What does she do? She's torn. In a way, it's no win because she loves him and she loves Sadie too.
Yeah, well, that's history. That's the beautiful thing about writing historical fiction is the history we were taught as children was written in very broad brushstrokes, black and white, and countries did this. And what we learn as researchers, that it's about those choices you're talking about, Lisa. It's about the individual choices that people make. That's what history is comprised of, is all those millions of choices and individual responses. And that's what we get to show in these stories.
I think that is so cool. And it's true, really, if I were just going to do English major for a minute, and we have serious readers here, but I think that when you think about what makes a characterization and why this novel succeeds on so many levels, part of what makes a characterization in my mind is a character is what a character does. You know, sometimes you're not going to say the character is brave. You're going to show them being brave, and they're going to make brave choices that are not like unbelievable. They're not, they're still plausibly brave. And I think what I love about this novel too is that it's the pandemic taught me this too, because you wrote this during the pandemic. And this idea that when you're entering historical period, as we just all did, we didn't know, as you said, we were flattening the curve. My daughter came home. We thought she'll be here for a month, maybe. I was like, forever. She was like, no. But now we look back after a year and go, we just went through a global pandemic. We just lived history, but we didn't know that. And that's what I think is so good about The Woman with the Blue Star, that you take us day to day as they live through history, and then it brings the characterization alive and the plot drives forward. And I really couldn't put this book down, which is really terrific, because I don't know what, I never copped to categories anyway, but it's a very thrilling historical fiction. It's written at the pace of a thriller. Well, so I don't even know how you did that. Would you do that in first draft? Is pacing first draft for you or second draft?
Drafts are a complicated thing. Lisa, are you a plotter or a pantser?
I am a pantser. We should explain that term because my daughter doesn't have. I taught her that term. But that's why we love each other. A pantser is someone who goes by the seat of her pants.
So I am a pantser to the extreme. So I was talking to another author. It might have been Karen White I was talking to, who like is a pantser, but she pantsers within each chapter. And that's not me. I write by the seat of my pants for the whole darn manuscript, right? So I open the and I go blah, 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 blah. And it all comes out in a random place. Natalie Goldberg called it, forgive me, throwing up on the page. But that's what I do. And so the problem with that is I don't even know what a draft is, right? Because you just keep going and going until it becomes something. So for me, it all happens at the same time. That's not to say that at some point I don't like bust out a notebook and start structuring and plotting all of that junk, but it's a very organic start to the process. So I can't say where it comes up. Weird, right?
It is so amazing and cool because to the people who haven't read this book yet, and that's why I kind of don't want to go too far into it, because there's genuine twists and turns and kind of a surprise ending. And I was like, girl, where'd you, I was like, because when you read, when I read people's books, I become them and I cheer. I'm like, how are you going to get out of this? How are you going to get out of this? What are you going to do? Because we love both these female characters. They're friends. We've bought in. Yeah. I want to know who's going to live. How are they going to live? What's going to happen? Please, God. And,
you are such a Philly woman. I won't even say Philly girl, because you're making reading a book sound like how I feel at an Eagles game, right? Like I'm cheering, and how are they going to come back? Like I love
that's how I feel. That's how I felt during this novel. I mean, and I think, and that's what's so cool about it, because I don't know what the trick is. The trick, in my view, would be characterization, because I think the characterization is so good. And I know that you feel the same way I do vis-a-vis not novels about the Holocaust. I've heard some people say, they've read a lot of them. I go, yeah, I have too. You know what? I haven't read enough. This is something, for example, you talk a little about Poland during World War II, because you taught me some history that I did not know. And I love that about this book.
Well, thank you. And so I should also mention, you asked me a while ago about, I think like Krakow, and the original story was set in Lviv. So I feel obliged to say this. So Poland during World War II was defeated and occupied super early in the war. And the country was very much subjugated. The Nazis put virtually all of the death camps there. I'm not talking, there were concentration camps throughout Europe, but the major death camps were in Poland. They were put there for proximity. They were put there for the train lines. And Poland is kind of has always been situated between like Germany and, Russia. And they, Norm Davies called it, I think, God's playground, because the wars have just gone back and forth. So, Germany swarms into Poland, sets up the camps. Some estimates are that 3 million Poles died as well. And so people are thrust into this really untenable situation of, individual response. Are they going to stand up and fight at cost to their families? Are they going to be bystanders or, in some cases, collaborators? Polish-Jewish history is super complex over centuries. So the true story of the people in the sewer was set in Lviv, or Lviv as it's sometimes called, which is a city on the Polish-Ukraine border. Depending what year it is, it might be in Poland, it might be in Ukraine. And so when I was researching that piece of it, there's an incredible nonfiction book. And Lisa, I'm sure you've seen that as a historical researcher, we use so many sources, memoir, photographs, periodicals. But if we're lucky, you find that one book that tells you. Yeah. And so In the Sewers of Lviv by Robert Marshall was this wonderful nonfiction book. And it talked about like how big the pipes were, because some were raging rivers and some were tiny little tunnels. And it talked about how they got water and if there was light, and about the vermin and the threat of drowning, and like everything in this book. So this was great. And then I decided to move the story to Krakow, which is near and dear to my heart. And I had to turn around and make sure that everything I had written in Lviv was now going to be actually possible, plausible, and accurate in Krakow. I've gone on for so long, I don't remember the original question.
No, but I think that's fascinating, because I read that and I think, and that's what's interesting too, because I thought that it was very cool that you know something, but you could, you know, and as someone who's experienced with historical fiction, how do you decide how much fact and how much fiction? And I thought you were very clear in the author's note. You acknowledge that novel, but how do you blend those so skillfully? Because I thought you really did that so well.
Thank you. You know, I always say with historical fiction, I think there's really 3 questions, and I promise I won't answer them all or we would be here all night. But it's, how do you do the research? It's, how do you weave the research in so we don't get a big dump of stuff that stops the story, right? Just because I think it's cool. And then how do you not screw up the research, right? How do you avoid the mistakes? Because, you know, there tend to be mistakes. And so we work hard on all 3 of those. In general, my stories are fiction. I think sometimes real life is not great plot, but it makes for wonderful setting. So my story is fictitious. My people are fictitious composite characters. And then you try and build a world that's accurate around them, accurate with geography, accurate with timeline. If you're going to make a conscious decision to deviate from something, like moving the city, I want to make sure I say that in the author's note so people understand that that was a thought out decision. It's fiction and it's not a mistake, I think is the way.
And I also thought what was so interesting, I'm curious how you do this, is that, because I encountered this problem with Eternal. I was like, we're used to writing in a character's voice, but you cannot write in a modern character's voice because it would be anachronistic. At the same time, you don't want the language to be stilted. I thought the dialogue in this novel really struck a terrific balance between period dialogue, but also a completely understandable. Were you aware of that?
I have certain predispositions toward modern language I always have to watch out for when I'm writing. And this book, and also bear in mind, they would be speaking in another language, right? So there's that whole change too. This book, I had more experts help me than any other book I've written because I was really trying to. So I had a sewer expert, I had a city expert, I had a language expert, and a historical fiction fact checker. Now the mistakes are still all mine, but it reached a point where they were like correcting each other and second guessing each other. We had almost gone too deep on it. So, and you're still overthinking every word right until that final version goes in, right?
Right, totally. I had a lot of help too. Do you feel, you know, when you're talking about a subject as weighty as the Holocaust, and there were real victims and real survivors, and as you say, you were taken to the community's heart. Does that add a layer of responsibility? How does that affect you, if at all?
It's overwhelming all of the time. So I regard my books as love songs to the people who I knew in Poland who lived through that most difficult of years. So I carry that with me on my shoulders. And I remember when I was writing my first book, Commandant's Girl, I had worked on a scene where someone had gone to either the symphony or the opera in Krakow. It was also in Krakow. And then I saw Band of Brothers, and I don't know if you've ever watched it, but I think Band of Brothers is the finest thing that was ever put on film. And it's either episode 8 or 9 when they liberate a concentration camp. And watching that, I was paralyzed with, you know, with what I was doing. I said, who am I to be writing Nights at the Symphony when this was going on, you know, less than an hour away? And the answer I came to was because these symphonies did go on and you have to show those other parts of the whole picture. But I am tremendously daunted in the process. Right.
But certainly I think your respect and the gravity of the subject comes through. And it becomes when historical, that's what I love about historical fiction and always have, that like in a novel like The Woman with the Blue Star, when you can make it a personal story, you do realize that in a way, all history becomes, to the extent that it becomes hardship. And as you say, it's not the Holocaust, but going through this pandemic, right? There were morgues set up in New York City, but also people wishing the basketball was on, you know, and people still live lives and they're parallel tracks. And somehow you have to describe that because that's real without, while still doing justice to both storylines.
And I think I felt that this past year so much in the writing. So
I bet you did.
Right. So first of all, I was writing a book about isolation and connection right as we were going through this very intense isolation and trying to find ways to connect with one another, like when we were all learning Zoom last year.
Right.
And then there were things that were going on in our lives. And I'm not suggesting what we lived is anywhere near what the people went through during the war. But last year, we suddenly found ourselves thinking like, can I get meat and can I get toilet paper? And how am I going to educate my children? And that really resonated to me with what Sadie's mother must have gone through, where in a space of months, they went from civilized normal life to living in the sewer.
Right.
How to think about all of those basic needs.
Right. I think that's amazing. Let's turn for a second in the 5 minutes or so we have before questions to talk about process, because I think people are interested in that. I'm kind of curious because, you know, you say you're right by the seat of your pants. My Hemingway quote is write drunk, edit sober. Get it down. And Annie Lamott says, you know, give yourself permission to write a shitty first draft.
Yes.
Yes. But now, what do you edit? You do your first draft. Are you editing during that time?
So I throw down the words in random order, and then, you know, months later, tens of thousands of words later, I have to get out a notebook and I have to start making chapters. And it's, thank God for cut and paste, right? Because you move stuff around, and then I have to start making it into like real words. Because in some sense, that first draft is almost notes for me. It's not beautiful.
Really?
Code, right? It's just like blah that comes out, and eventually this gets done, except, and I'm going to keep it real here for a second.
Do it.
I turned in The Woman with the Blue Star. My beloved editor looked at it and she said, nah. And I was like, no? She's like, no. And I was like, oh. And I had to rewrite 95% of this book in 5 months. I had pantsed it and I had just missed the mark. And so
that happened.
I was it. It's okay. Right? It's okay. You lived through it, but I don't really want to live through that again. And so I'm a little more of a plotter now. Like I do a chapter outline roughly before I start. So I still pants, but at least I know where the stuff goes, you know?
So then when do you edit? Like after you get the notes organized and you make it into words, and then how many times do you think you edit it?
I have no idea. I just keep going and smoothing and, you know, massaging and doing this and troubleshooting in a notebook on the side. And it just goes on for a really long time. And then I do not turn in perfect drafts. At some point, when it's pretty far along, like it's a finished draft, but I know it needs something. And it's like what I imagine cooking to be like if I could actually cook. It's like I would say, you know, I would want someone else to taste it and be like, too much salt, not enough salt. And so that's when I give it to my editor and my agent, you know, to kind of say like it needs more of this, or it's a finished draft, but it's never the end for me. Right. Never. I need a lot of work.
So cool. No, and I know you are an early morning person. By the way, we should mention that there is a great book club questions on your website.
Thank you.
It's such a great book club book. I mean, it's got so many layers to it, and the twists and turns are so terrific. But you write 5, because I want to know how you do it, because I'm a lady alone in a house with 4 dogs. All I do is write. Now, you have 3 kids, a dog. How do you
a bird and a lizard
each? You know, it says in the book club stuff that you write between 5 and 7 in the morning. How do you do that?
So that is that's still, you know, I started, Lisa, were we at the same, we might have been at the same law firm, not at the same time, but so
I was at Deckard.
Okay, I was at Morgan. Okay, so not the same.
I was paralegal at Morgan.
Right. Okay, because I know we know people. So so when I became a writer, I was a first-year associate at a big Philly law firm with $1,000 a month in student loan debt. So I wasn't going to go get to write in that castle or that, you know, elegant place. I was writing from 5 to 7 in the morning. And so that remains my favorite time. Whether or not I get that time depends on the day. So the 5 a.m. Writers Club is a real thing on Twitter. 4 a.m. Writers Club is not a thing, and but I've gone there if I have to. So I'm also, I don't know, do you like to work in short bursts, or are you long stretch writers?
No, I know. I'm a sit on your butt and don't get up for 10 hours. I have no life, but there you go.
I'm so jealous, though. I'm a short burst writer. I have no stamina.
I know. I saw you said that. I thought it was so cute.
No stamina. And so
any mom of 3 kids with a dog has stamina.
I do that first burst at like 5, and then I get everybody out of the house, God willing, and, you know, the COVID don't rise. I get them all out of the house, and then I would love another burst from like, you know, 9 to 11 or something. And after lunch is my weakness, right? Because I've been up. It feels like bedtime already by after lunch. At that point, I'm usually more to the research or something else other than the straight writing. I just don't have that long stamina.
Wow. Well, see, no, I'm just lazy, so I can sit forever. I'm great at sitting.
Yeah, but you said you do 2,000 words a day. Am I right?
I do.
That's amazing. I never hit more than 1,000. I'll be like, woo, if I hit 1,000, I'll be like ready for a nap.
Well, when you get to be as old as me, you're like, yeah, what else am I going
to Someday my bucket list, I'll just sit down at the shore. I'm going to sit down.
Right. Well, and let's tell them a little about your next book before we take questions. Tell us what's up next.
So it's funny. I'm usually an open book about what I'm writing. And then I was being like oddly quiet about it. And then I realized I already answered it in the book club guide. So
the book club guide.
My next book is inspired by a true story of the only known sabotage of a train headed for Auschwitz. And so it looks at the story of both some people on the train and the saboteurs. And that's what I'm working on.
See, when I read that, I said, that is such a good idea. That's what's so amazing about this time period, that there's so many dramatic stories, and that that underpinning them is the truth of this cataclysmic war, global war, so many personal stories, so many families, so many countries. It's just big. And I can't wait to read it. And I love this, and I recommend it to everybody. Yay! So
thank you. You haven't let me fail about Eternal.
This is your gig, girl. This is your gig.
I'm just gonna say I love it.
So there, let's ask questions.
Oh,
we can't hear you. A bad thing happened.
There we go. Oh, that was my own. Yay! My dog was barking, so I had myself turned off. We're gonna have to just hope my dog stays cooperative here. But yeah, I was just gonna say, I actually just finished Eternal, and it's so wonderful because you know what, the many ways of looking at how people before Mussolini became the horrible fascist he was, like the early parts of the book, I'm like, you know what, he was beloved. Like I think we all forget that there were people in Italy that loved Mussolini before he was Mussolini. You know what I mean? Like, I think it was so fascinating, and to look at it from those three different viewpoints of those three main characters who I just fell in love with. So yeah.
No, I think it's exactly what Pam was saying. You really have to look at it day to day, just as they lived it. And when you look back, you're like, that whole country lost its way, and you have to try to understand and explicate how that could have happened.
I think it's fascinating what people thought at a moment in time. Like I love the period in Germany right after World War I, where guess what? The Jewish people there thought it was like Berlin was like the center of the universe and the best place possible, and who knew?
And it's so interesting because with respect to Italy, I was sort of stunned by the fact that World War I ends and then 5 years later, World War II starts. That's like kind of crazy. Yeah. And Jews came to Italy because the intermarriage rate was 50%. Jews were completely assimilated into Italian society. The mayor of Rome was Jewish, so that it took such an anti-Semitic turn as the war went on was really horrifying. So, but anyway, people have questions. Let's see.
People have questions. Let's do this. So let's start with an interesting question, and maybe this can be for both of you as well. And this comes from someone named Rafia. She wants to know, at what point does historical fiction become cultural appropriation? And how do you handle that tension in your work?
Okay, Pam, take it away.
Two law school professors here, and we're like, I think it's an interesting question. My greatest concern is that I never stake too large a claim around what is true in my books. I think that's where people get into trouble, is if I want to be very clear that I hear a story, I'm inspired by it, and what I write is fiction. And so, for example, with The Woman with the Blue Star, there were multiple people in that sewer, and I don't take any one person's story. Or in Lost Girls of Paris, there were multiple female agents working for the British government. And there's a thread from each one. It's part of why I moved the book from Lviv to Krakow, as I was like, this is not my story to tell, so yes.
Right. I agree. I guess I felt like this was my story to tell because I had been researching it for like 40 years. And also I think the key point is what you said, that it's fictional. So, and I guess I identify so much with being Italian American. So I have relatives in Italy, and I put so much of like for example, when the main character in Eternal gets her first bra, like that was my experience. And I was like, now, why is that in a novel? Well, it's in a novel because I have to show sort of her growing into a woman and kind of a sexual awakening, and also her relationship with her mother, who isn't very nice and is weirdly jealous of her. And so when you make the characters real, bringing so much about you, then you feel that it is your story. And I think it's what's really important with both our novels and almost all historical fiction that I've read, the quality level is so high. Every single person I know, and I've met so many authors in this genre, and they're super welcoming. They work their butts off to get this right. Everybody has lots of sources. Everybody acknowledges sources. Everybody gets people to help them. And I think it's really important that the stories get told.
Yes.
And what's great about that, finally, too, and then I'll shut up, is that my telling a story about pre-war Italy leading into fascism isn't the only, I can't even believe that no one's written, I don't think there's any popular American novel about this subject. I'm just going to say, what happened to the Jews of Rome? This is it. Now, more people should write them. Everybody should write a novel from their point of view, because the voice will be different. The story they tell will be different. The characters will be different. And I welcome that. What you really want is a multiplicity and diversity and an opening up and an inclusiveness, not a, this is not your story to tell.
Right. Because if we do that, then sooner or later, there's nothing to tell. These books serve a function. They're entertaining. Right. But if someone reads my book and goes, I'm going to go learn about the people in the sewer, I'm going to go learn about the female agents, it serves an education function. So not just it can and should we tell the stories, we must tell the stories to keep them alive.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah. And
not the storyteller.
Right. And I think, yeah, it does lead to further research. I'm reading Lisa C's book, the Sea Island, but the Sea Divers of Henya.
I love that book. Right.
Isn't that a great book? And I had no idea that
who dive. Go. I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No. We're good. We're
all over each other. With
any novel educates you, but I think historical fiction does.
It does
terrifically.
And Lauren Willig's book about the Band of Sisters, I had no idea that the Smith College sent a group of women to the front lines of World War I, and these college women went out to the front. I had no idea, and it's all true. And she had it all from the archives. So I think, it often will, lead you down your own research path to discovering something new.
The whole thing is your own research path.
Yeah. And I'm a librarian, so I think that's why I like historical fiction so much, because it does lead me on these other paths. So let's go to another totally different question here. This is for Pam. What took you from the Pentagon to being a writer?
Oh, well, that's a long.
Another Pamela Ross wants to know.
So I went to the Pentagon. Let me think. I went through undergrad. I went to Cambridge. So I have a master's in history. And when I was at Cambridge, so let me back up. When I went to college, I had to pay for school myself. I was at GW and had to work like these little part-time jobs. I couldn't do the unpaid internships. My boss from a law firm where I was just like a little messenger running around DC became the Secretary of the Army. And when I heard that, I wrote to him, and I was coming back from England, and I said, can I have a job? And so he was a Clinton appointee. He brought me in, and I saw the world from the shoulders of giants that year. I went all around the world with him to the 50th anniversary of World War II commemorations. Then I left there and I went to the State Department, went to Poland. I came back from Poland. I went to Penn Law, like Lisa. And so all this was going on, but my whole life I'd actually wanted to be a writer. Like since being a little kid, I wanted to be a novelist. And so I finished Penn Law. I started a job at a Philly firm on September 4th, 2001. And 1 week later, 9/11 happened. And I had a life epiphany and I said, dear God, I don't want to die at the law firm. And I love the law firm. I love lawyers, but I had never achieved my dream of being a novelist. So I took a course at Temple Night School in Philly at 15th and Market. Now I teach at Rutgers, but I took the course at Temple, and that course was called Write Your Novel This Year. And I started working on my first book, and I was working along. So it was this long and winding road from having the experiences that would fuel my novels to actually sitting down and writing that book.
Wow.
That's a great story.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. That is a great story. Okay, I got so caught up in the story, I forgot to be looking at the other questions. Hang on a second.
See, you're a good storyteller, Pam.
I'm so tired, I never know what I'm saying.
Okay, so Sally Davis writes that she absolutely couldn't put your book down and had never heard this history of Jewish people living in the sewer. Her question is about, how did you find out about this during your couple of years in Poland? Was it written somewhere, or did it come up in the stories that you learned from the local people? Were there many Jewish people that lived in sewers in multiple locations? So just basically, and then there was another user who said, how did you find out and research about life in the sewers? So we had kind of two questions, like just the discovery of the story.
So the story of the people in the sewer did not come from my time in Poland. That just gave me my love of the era. I mean, I found this story when I was researching on the internet, looking for what I wanted to do next. I found the story of the people in the sewer, and it was very specific to Lviv. So there may have been people in other cities, but this was the particular story that inspired me. And then when I moved the book to Krakow, I had to make sure that there was a sewer and people had gone through it, because in Krakow, there's this big river that divides like the city center from the part where the ghetto was. So it had to be very specific as to where people were coming up out of the sewer, because I was not convinced. I had a sewer expert in Krakow, and I was not convinced that you could have gone under that river at that point in time. So it's very specific as to the sewer. And I learned about it from a variety of sources, but the best one was In the Sewers of Lviv, which was a nonfiction book.
Okay. And we're getting lots of comments right now, by the way, for those who are in the Q&A portion, about just how everybody's enjoying this evening and the answers and the depth of your answers here. So let's take another question from the audience. And this one comes from a teacher librarian who wants to know if either of you have any comments for teachers about how to inspire students to write or become writers or do more of that.
I want to hear Lisa, because she's my icon hero here. So go ahead.
You know, I will answer that, because I think this is kind of amazing. But I took a course at Penn with Philip Roth, who was teaching that year, a course called Literature of the Holocaust and also Literature of Desire. It was a seminar. And he was the one who introduced me to the work of Primo Levi, who was an Italian Jew. He was a chemist who was arrested during the Holocaust because he was anti-fascist, and taken to Auschwitz and survived to write the incredible memoir, Survival in Auschwitz. If you should read it. It's unbelievable, because he was such a brilliant guy. They actually like analogizes it to like Dante's Inferno. I mean, it's really, really moving and well done. And as soon as I learned all about that, it made me, this was 40 years ago, start researching about what happened to Italian Jewry, because I just didn't really know about it, and I wanted to know more about it. And that is all the inspiration for Eternal. And so I'm glad you asked that, because it gets me to say, when I really broke it down, I thought, isn't it amazing? Look, the guy was a famous teacher, but it doesn't matter, because he's just a teacher. And that's everything, because 40 years ago, a teacher gave me this idea and exposed me to books that I hadn't read and would not have read. And here we are 40 years later, and it became a book that I was dying to write and finally wrote. And it's all because of that teacher. So God bless teachers. Teacher librarians are like saints. And it really is amazing, because I think we can all look back at teachers and have say, oh, that person had such an effect on me. I think of my high school English teachers. But I hope teachers hear from me that you can have an effect on someone that is 40 years into the future, and they'll still thank you. And I do. It's really amazing.
It's an incredible story. And while you mention librarians, can I just say that I'm your original library aficionado? So before COVID, I was using 5 library systems a week, because I have to keep me and my 3 children in books. And, the hardest thing about COVID, my library actually called to check on me during COVID. They're like, hello, this is the library. We just want to make sure you're all right. And so on my 50th birthday last month, that's what we did, is we took the kids back to the library for the first time since COVID. So it was very, very special. So mwah to the libraries. I just have to say that. We love you.
Right.
Yeah. I saw that on Instagram when you did that. And I'm like, oh, Pam.
Oh, it was so exciting.
Librarian heart.
It was so exciting.
Can someone add these other titles being recommended? I'm a multitasker, missing the exact titles and authors. So Pam, so we're recommending other titles.
I guess they read Primo Levi. That's nice.
Yes.
Yeah. We'll put them in the chat. So
yes.
Hang on a moment though. So then there's a question here for you, Pam, about if you had seen the movie In Darkness. It's a 2011 Polish film based on a nonfiction book about a family that hid in sewers, directed by, I can't say that name. It's a Polish.
Holland. Yeah. I'm aware of In Darkness. I have not seen it. It's based on, it was inspired by that same book that I used as a research source, but I have not seen the film. I've only used the book for this particular project. However, I have definitely seen Europa, and that had this incredible scene I'll never forget, where there were people in the war trying to flee, and they were on a boat in the middle of this river, right? And the Polish people were trying to get to Germany because they thought it would be less bad. And the Jewish people were trying to get to Russia because, they were like both fighting as to which way they should go, because the evil was relative to them, and to their situation. So I definitely remember that movie for sure.
I think Agnieszka Holland, her films are unbelievable.
Yeah.
She has, I guess she's done 3, and I watched them. I mean, it was great on Netflix.
Amazing.
Oh, I'm gonna have to go look those up.
I forget all the titles, but they're art.
That's what's so great about these type of events. You always learn so much more than what you bargained for when you came in. But now I want to ask you a question, Lisa. So this is your first historical fiction novel. Are you going to do another historical fiction novel, or are you going to go back to Rosato and D'Annunzio, or another standalone thriller? What's your plan?
The answer is yes to all things. I actually just finished a domestic thriller today.
Oh, I know. And you celebrated by being here with us.
This is great. Are you guys looking forward to this? It's called What Happened to the Bennetts, and it's about a family that gets into trouble. And now I'm going to start historical. I'm very jazzed. I really have loved writing historical fiction, and maybe maybe people who are a little older in the audience can identify. It's really kind of. I felt like I'm finding a new gear. It's very nice to be, and as you said, what you said about libraries is really true. And people who read, that's why I love people who read, because we're just intellectually curious. We want to learn something, and you can learn from fiction as well as nonfiction. And I kind of love doing it. And so I love reading it and I love writing it, and I'm going to do it again.
Yay.
Yay. People here volunteering to read any drafts that you guys, if you need
drafts. That's so nice.
Work, but somebody's got to do it.
Yeah. But are you doing another Rosato and D'Annunzio book?
I am going to do a Rosato and D'Annunzio after that.
Unbelievable.
Well, look, we all have, whether we're writing them or reading them, a life in books, correct? And how great are they? I mean, I just read another novel the other day. I was like, this is just wonderful. I love reading, and we're just really privileged to have a life in books, and writing them especially. We wouldn't be anywhere without the librarians or the people reading us. Exactly. And they've supported us both throughout our very long careers, right, Pam? So
yes.
Hell,
but not in the past tense. We're still going strong.
We really are.
Oh, okay. Now we have a question from both you. They want from Julie. What is the best book that you have read this year? So in 2021, and then we're going to discount any books that we're talking about tonight already. That we're not going to put, let's go for a different kind of author. Best book that you've read this year.
Can I recommend my daughter?
I was going to recommend your daughter.
You recommend my daughter, then I'll say a different one.
Francesca Saratella, The Ghosts of Harvard. And now technically it was my favorite book of 2020, not 2020.
Yes, I'm here.
But it's out in paperback now, and it's incredible.
Thank you. I think it's really wonderful. It's a story about a young girl who goes to Harvard in the wake of her brother's suicide there. And she begins to hear voices because he had schizophrenia. And so it's sort of psychological for us. I'm very proud of her. I really do think it's terrific. I finished a wonderful novel, The Golem and the Genie.
Oh, okay.
Helene Wecker. I'm not sure if that's how you say it. I'm late to the party. It's 7 years old.
Yeah.
Her new one is out this week called The Hidden Palace. And that was terrific. Also historical fiction. But we both, between us, right? Chris Bajalian, Hour of the Wolf, The Wingate, Before We Were Yours. I mean, Christina Baker Klein has a new paper called The Exiles.
Yeah.
Kristen Harmel, The Night of Vanishing Stars. all I do is read. So
and Kristen Hanna's I just finished Kristen Hanna's The Four Winds.
So there's a lot of great stuff out there for people who are looking for historical fiction.
I do something called 100 Days of Books. I've done it 3 times now, where every day for 100 days, I list a book that I loved. It could be debut, bestseller, memoir, fiction, all across genres. And if anybody ever wants that list, I have it on a Pinterest board. It's the only thing I use Pinterest for, is the 100 books.
I think that's so great that you do that, Pam. I mean, because I think the best thing you can do is tell somebody about a book that they love. And someone today, I just gave her, and she was like, good rec. And I was like, good rec.
I know. Well, it's about paying it forward, because, enormous authors like you, I mean, Lisa, have all been so generous in like throwing the rope back down for the next person to climb up, and being really supportive, that it's just a real joy to pay it forward.
I love your book. I hope everybody gets it. And that's very nice of you guys to discount it at this indie. That's wonderful.
And I'm going to just add, speaking about authors that like throw the rope down and pull others up, another Philly girl, Jennifer Weiner. And I've seen her do that for several authors as well. And I love that. I kind of maybe feel like the Philly author girls, there should be like the Philly Authors Club. And you guys should
it does not have to meet at 5 a.m.
No, it doesn't have to meet at 5 a.m. But we are having, and I'm going to put this link in here, we're actually really thrilled. And I'm going to say both of you are invited to come to the Princeton Library at any time for an in-person event. You're not too far away. Lisa, you and your daughter could come and do an event together, because that would be amazing.
Thank you so much. We will emerge soon and try to do that.
Yes. Oh yeah, Yellow Wife. Someone put that. That was a great book. So we're actually having Jen Weiner come to the library for our first in-person event since the pandemic, and that just feels like a major milestone. I mean, these virtual events are awesome. We get to see so many people from all around the country, and everybody can join in. But Jen is going back on a very limited tour. And she actually, her very first event 20 years ago was at the Princeton Public Library. So it's kind of fortuitous that she's coming back after the pandemic to make one of her first post-pandemic appearances. It's outdoors. It's going to be socially distanced. It's bring your own chair, just so you know, because it's on a lawn outside. So I just had to put that in there. And she's just another great, and her book, That Summer, is one of the best that I've read this year as well. It tackles some tough issues. It's not, you think it should be a beach read, and it is a beach read, but it's got some tougher issues in it, which is nice also to see in a Jen book. So it's not historical fiction though. So, okay. I think we're just at about the top of the hour. So is there anything else? There's no more questions in the queue. We're going to have to find that 100 Days of Books that you on your Pinterest. Are you easy to find on Pinterest, Pam?
I don't know if I'm easy to find on Pinterest, but I'm easy to find everywhere else. And if people find me, I will help them find the Pinterest.
Okay. That's good, because that sounds like fun, the 100 Days of Books. And I'm still looking forward to continuing to read your books. And again, you have standing invitations to our library. We're just a stone's throw away from you both, as you know. And we always partner with Labyrinth Books for our events. And so we get lots of, we like to support our independent bookstores, and Labyrinth Books is one of the best independent bookstores out there. And so I think it'd actually be really good to have Francesca come and have a Harvard-based book in Princeton.
Right, they can duke it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so there's the link. Purchase Women with the Blue Star or Eternal from Labyrinth Books. You get your 10% discount if you order from them and mention this event. And we have so many great comments coming in. I hope you guys,
thank you, everybody.
Thank you for being here. And thank you to Lisa for doing this with us.
We appreciate it so much. Pam, congrats.
Thank you.
Congratulations,
I can't wait to see you in person. It's going to be hugs all around.
Agree.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, stay safe, everybody. And we will see you on Crowdcast sometime soon again, I'm sure, for the people in the audience who follow our events. And we'll follow you along as well as you guys tour. Okay, good night, everybody.
Stay safe.
Yes.
Well, thank you. Good night. Mwah.
Mwah.